We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style. And so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bub Reports with Dr. Kellan Bub. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this. So I'm not sure you were quiet on this.
That's a question.
Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
Yes, we did. But let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
Hello, everyone, and we welcome you to this week's edition of the Bub Report. Of course, I am your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. Let me just adjust my audio. We're having some technical issues, but of course, we are here with you again for another Sunday of the program. Do us a favor by liking and sharing this week's program. Now, as a matter of the editorial, CBI programs began as a novel concept in the late 20th century, offering individuals the opportunity to acquire a second citizenship in exchange for substantial investment in the host country. Now, these programs promised various benefits, including visa-free travel, favorable tax regimes, and enhanced global mobility. However, as the industry expanded, so did the opportunities for abuse, leading to a series of scandals that have significantly damaged its credibility as a program. Now, only last week, we saw yet another example of this in the case of Grenada, where the island's CBI agency, the Investment Migration Agency, suspended all citizenship by investment applications from the Singapore Heng Sheng and the Grenada National Resort Project, effective the 18th of March, according to a circular it released on Friday. Now, the government agency cited owner financing and illegal discounting as practices that violate established legal and regulatory frameworks, as well as undermining the integrity of both the investment migration industry in Grenada and Grenada's CBI program. Now, the question I have personally is, what will be happening to the Grenada Resort project up there in Livera? What will be happening with that? Certainly, Mr. Duncan and others at the IMA, we would love to have you here on the Bub Report to have a conversation about that. Now, this action by Grenada's CBI program follows earlier enforcement measures. Now, just 2 weeks ago, the IMA rejected 8 citizenship applications after discovering clear and incontrovertible evidence of owner loan financing and resultant price discounting. Now, this is not the first time CBI programs in the Caribbean came under scrutiny. Now, one of the most significant blows to the CBI industry in the OECS came with the racketeer-influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act litigation in the United States involving St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, that lawsuit alleged that nefarious actors exploited the CBI program for money laundering, tax evasion, and other illicit activities. Now, this case underscores the vulnerabilities within the CBI framework, particularly concerning due diligence and applicant screening. In response to the challenges brought to light by the RICO litigation, St. Kitts and Nevis undertook significant reforms to restore the credibility of its own CBI program. The St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship by Investment Unit has been restructured as a statutory corporation to enhance transparency, accountability, and efficiency. Now, these reforms are part of a broader effort to align the program with the international best practices and addresses these concerns raised by international stakeholders. Folks, of course, the CBI program, as we know, is a major revenue earner for the state of Grenada. So this is a story that we will be following with interesting detail, with great detail, as it unfolds. Now, before we get to the break and before we get to our first segment, this message, the final message I have here, is directed to the president of the Media Workers Association of Grenada. Now, we here at the Bub Report only heard through the grapevine on Saturday night, that's last Saturday, while the Media Workers Association was having its award ceremony, that this platform, the Bub Report, was nominated for an award at the association's annual event that was held at the Grenada Trade Center. Now, Mr. Joseph, I think if you are going to be nominating our platform for an award, I think the courteous thing to do and the respectful thing to do would be to at least inform us that we were nominated for award. But not only that, we understand that the category that was created for this award was actually a People's Choice Award, and so that it was adjudicated by the audiences of these various platforms. Again, this is not sour grapes. Congratulations to all of the winners of the 2025 Media Awards ceremony. And I think the work of the media workers in Grenada must be celebrated and recognized, but at least have the courtesy to inform us that we were in a category that we didn't even know that was actually a category where people had to vote. So that's the last thing I would say on this. And folks, what we will do now, we will take our first break and come back with our first guest for this week. A very interesting story that this guest has to tell. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. Now, before we get to our first guest here, I consider this a treat for me, and I believe for Grenada as well. A daughter of Grenada is about to share her story here exclusively on the Bub Report. But I just want to say good morning to the folks who are joining us. Cadilla Henry saying good morning, Dr. Bub and your viewers. Good morning to you, Miss Henry. Thanks for being a persistent viewer here. We also have Lydia James, Onika. We have Susan, Ingrid, Dr. Jocelyn Peters. Of course, we have Margaret. Margaret, do me a favor. Let's behave today. This is an inside joke between my good friend Margaret and myself. Of course, Margaret is a part of the George Grant Honors Society. Of course, she was one of the big fans of the Sundays with George Grant, and she, of course, stayed with us here on the Bub Report following George Grant's passing. And, of course, we have Mr. Akeem Lewis. Mr. Lewis, welcome, sir. Welcome. Then we have Onesto. And we have a Deborah Brown. We have, again, Esther Peters. So we have a lot of you on the live. Do us a favor, those of you who are on the live stream today, do us a favor by liking and sharing today's program so that others can have an opportunity to participate in the program as well. We have someone here who's also watching from Toronto, Canada. Welcome, Toronto, in the room. That's Ann Bub. Ann, I wonder if you're related. I don't know, but it's good to have you as well. Mr. Anthony DeRiggs, good morning, sir, as well as Rhonda Modeste Sampson. So, folks, we are now going to get into the first segment of the program. Now, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program was created by the Barack Obama administration in June of 2012. Now, the objective of the program is to protect eligible young adults who were brought to the United States as children from deportation and provide them with work authorization for temporary renewable periods. Now, the DACA program does not offer a pathway to citizenship or adjustment of status for that matter. Now, as of September 30th, 2024, there were roughly 538,000 active DACA recipients from close to 200 different countries of birth residing all over the United States. Of course, there are Grenadian and Caribbean DACA recipients in the program as well, although many of the people that we see speaking out in relation to DACA are those who are from Central and South America. Now, while individuals with DACA status can be authorized to work, they had previously been ineligible for things like federal health coverage through Medicaid, the Children's Health Insurance Program, and the Affordable Care Act Health Insurance Marketplace. Now, these restrictions result in higher uninsured rates among DACA recipients, contributing to barriers to accessing healthcare in the United States. Now, the Biden administration on the 17th of January 2025, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that certain parts of the DACA program to be unlawful. However, the court did not order an immediate end to the program, which means that DACA recipients can continue renewing their work permits and their permission to remain in the United States as they have in the past. Now, more than a decade after the program was created, however, a growing number of DACA recipients say they are looking to leave the country on their own terms, especially in this Trump era. Now, immigrant and community activists say interest among DACA recipients in building a future outside of the United States borders has been surging in recent months, not only after the Federal Appeals Court in October said that the DACA program is likely illegal and should be eliminated entirely, but surrogates of the current administration, the current regime in Washington, D.C., have also rubbished the suitability and eligibility of the program as well. Now, legal experts expect this DACA case to eventually reach the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, today on the Bub Report, we are joined by a Grenadian national who is part of the growing number of DACA recipients who are choosing to return to their countries of origin instead of remaining in the United States in this current environment. Our guest goes by a pseudonym for legal reasons. And happy we are to be joined by Naya. Naya is now joining us on the Bub Report for this segment. Naya, good morning and welcome to the Bub Report.
Good morning, Kellon. How are you?
I'm doing well. Let me just first of all thank you for reaching out to us, because you reached out to us.
Yes,
and we immediately jumped at the opportunity to have this conversation because we believe it's very relevant and timely given everything that's happening now in the United States. So welcome to the Bub Report.
Of course, yes. Thank you for having me. That was a really good intro. You really broke down a lot of the issues that, I have to keep in mind while living in the United States. Yes, you definitely did.
What we try to do here is research. I mean, I'm a scholar, I'm an academic, so I live and breathe research.
Right, that's good.
Yeah. So tell us about Naya. Tell us who Naya is. So before we get into the brass tacks here about your status, who is Naya? Yeah. What are some fun facts about Naya?
Well, I am a happy-go-lucky person. I love to smile. I'm a creative person in several aspects. I love to do oil paintings. I've even made soap. I've written a children's book. I've done several things, and I love to explore ideas, whatever it may be. But I'm a child of the internet. Love to go on the internet and see what new there is, do research just like yourself, and learn new things for sure. Yeah.
So you say you do painting. So I suspect you also like art. You're into art. Is that something you do?
Yes. I did that quite a bit in school, high school particularly, did it in college as well. I can show you one of my paintings here. I'm considering giving away one today. So this is just one of them.
Very nice.
This is an oil painting that I did.
Yes.
I do bigger things as well. Let me show you another one. And this goes to show that the Caribbean is always on my mind.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, that's just some of the things that I've worked on. I think this was 2023. I did those paintings. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
Thank
very nice.
you.
That is good to know. So you're a woman of many talents. Of course, I suspect you. Would you call yourself a Gen Z or a millennial?
Millennial.
You're millennial. Okay. Okay. You're millennial. Okay. I think our generation is the coolest generation. But hey, I say that to my students all the time, and I get side-eyed by them. Now, let us talk about your coming to America story. What was your earliest memory immigrating to the United States? I believe you said you were 14 at the time. So you were a teenager when you immigrated to the United States. Let's talk about that.
Yes, I was 14 when I arrived here. I came on vacation, actually, my birthday, my 14th birthday. A correction, I'm a Trinidadian by birth.
Trinidadian by birth. Okay.
Yes, and Grenadian through grandparents. So that's through descent. So yes, I came with my father, in 2001, and it was a fun time. It was a fun break. My birthday's in the summertime, so you go to Six Flags, you do all those great things, and then to the end of my trip, decisions were made. My parents had different plans for me, and like most parents, you want the best for your children. And so my mom was staying, and I stayed with her, and that is history. So I went to high school here, which was an interesting experience. My first day of school was September 11th, 2001 in New York City. So you can imagine that is my first dose of what it is to live in a big city, big country. And so I went to high school, went to college. College was a good experience. Everything was mostly surrounding architecture. And so my degree is in architecture. And that just sums up my experience in terms of education and arriving in the United States. Yeah.
So you went to school, you had no issues there. At what point did you get a sense that legally that there might have been an issue with your status? Was it when you were in school? Because obviously if you're pursuing any type of college degree, or high school. So let's talk about what happened in high school that you arrived at the conclusion that, hey, what is happening here, and what do I need to do to fix this?
Yeah, I was in high school. I started asking questions, but you trust your parents, and I asked some questions like, hey, can I go back home? Can I, what is that deal? And it was not super clear, but I realized that, the way how I exist here is different than other people, so it was around high school. And then it was clear to me, okay, my status is in limbo, really. So it was during high school. That's when I noticed that, because I had to really trigger my brain to think about that.
Right.
It was around high school.
It was around high school.
Yeah.
Right. So let us talk about now. After high school, of course, you get into college. What college did you attend? CUNY in New York?
CUNY.
Okay, so you did CUNY. Because I obviously when you're going into college, you're looking for things like scholarships. You have to apply for FAFSA.
Exactly.
That is usually the route that people take. So what was that experience like for you, going from high school to college? And again, with knowing what you know now, with that as the backdrop, how did you navigate all of that?
Well, fortunate for me, New York City, they are very lenient and they give grace to people who have an immigration status that is in limbo, or so you will pay. Because I went to high school, I graduated high school, I paid in-state tuition, and it was it was a reasonable amount of money where it was affordable, and so that's the deal. Because unfortunately, currently, anyone who is trying to attend college for many states and they have DACA, they will have to pay out-of-state tuition. So many people don't go to college. So I really, now in hindsight, I have to call my blessing that I did reside in New York City and not another state. So yeah,
absolutely. And the reality is, many of us Caribbean people, we do start off in New York City as undocumented immigrants. Let's be real. Some of us come and we overstay our visas. There is a woman in New York, and I will say this without any apology. She smuggled in the United States from Canada in the trunk of a car, and today she's a Trump supporter calling on people to be deported. This is a woman from Grenada. So when I hear some Grenadians talk about, oh, you need to go back, you need to do this, you need to do that, follow the rules. Yeah, a lot of you had no papers when you came here. So you should be the last people judging. Sorry, I just had to go off on that tangent. I'm so sorry over that.
That's fine. Understandable. Yeah, I mean, some people, memories, they forget where they've come from.
Yeah. Now, let us then talk about following your exit from college. Of course, you graduated. As a Caribbean people, I know that we always come here and we do well in many respects. But let us talk about how you navigated professional life. And this is pre-DACA now I'm talking. We will get into the DACA conversation. How did you navigate professional life, trying to carve a career path following your exit from university in New York?
Well, on graduating, I have no social, so it's yeah. So I'm like, okay, so what do I do? So I was making plans to return to the Caribbean. My professor turned to me and said, don't go back, so everyone wants to give their advice, and that was one of the main things. And granted, I was young, so I had still a lot of opportunities that could come my way, and so forth. So I decided to stay. And from that point until DACA, I was doing odd jobs, just to help out financially, whether it be babysitting or whatever it may be. Just little odd jobs. My mentor, she would show me the ropes. So at least I still kind of got like a little, how should I say it? Taste of architecture. So she would take me around her office and so forth. And so I did that for like 3 years. 3 years, yeah, about roughly 3 years. I graduated college in 2011. So yeah, I did that for 3 years. And, around that time, the economy wasn't good as well. And it was really tough. So after, I don't want to get like after DACA, but even after I've gotten my papers, DACA, I should say, it was still rough finding something in my industry, and it's an industry where it's very finicky. It's based on the economy, and so that took roughly 3 years on graduation for me to finally get a job in a firm, in an architectural firm. Yeah.
Yes, so of course that took some time. So obviously, not having any documentation, that's one of the biggest things that you have to ponder. If I apply for this job, how do I get this job, right? And again, there are those who also say, you immigrants come here and you mooch up the government. Well, how can you mooch up the government? If you do not have a social, you don't have a social, you're not in the system. So there is also this narrative. Sorry, I'm getting off on some tangents today, only because some of our people are just too much. We're just too extra when it comes to that. So now let us talk about DACA. That happened, I believe, in 2012. When did you find out about DACA? How did you find out about it? And how did DACA at least ease some of the uncertainties that you were experiencing?
Yeah, I was, trying to remember where I was, but I believe I was with my mentor that day. And I don't recall all the details as to when I found, like how I found out, but I think it was like a big thing. It was a big executive order that the president at the time, President Barack Obama, did. And when I heard the criteria and they started listing all the things, I was like, that is me. Like, that is me. And from that moment on, I felt like I can finally live, live and just do things that adults do, which is work and provide and help and take care of themselves. So, after some time and working odd jobs, even after I did get my social, my mentor, he recommended me for a position at a top architectural firm in New York City. And when I got in there, everyone knew me, which was weird because he used my portfolio. My professor used my portfolio as a studying tool. And so a lot of the employees at the firm knew me through my portfolio. And so I came in and I did the best I can, and it was a great experience. From that point on, things took a change because I decided to move. I moved out of state. And I moved from like firm to firm to firm. And, I've realized the way how I want to go about, using my architectural degree was a bit different. So, yes, I had that pinnacle moment, getting that job in New York City. It was a great experience. But just like, everyone is discovering, learning about themselves, I had to do that too as well. So, so that's it. I currently don't work in the industry, but I would like to work in there in a different kind of way. So yeah.
I get the sense that you're the type of person who does not want to be told what to do, and you don't like working with people. Do I get that sense? You have that entrepreneurial spirit in you, Naya?
I do like working with people. I think I got that from my mom. She has that kind of, work independently. She's very creative herself. And so I did that whole office thing. It was really cool. I learned great things. I learned enough where I can get a better understanding of how the industry works. And so I spent 6 years getting this degree. It's an advanced degree, so I'll find a way to use it. But that because of DACA, I was able to explore that and know that that it in the setting that everyone goes along, getting a job in the office, that may not be for me. So I am appreciative for at least for that part,
At least for the experience that came out of that as well. Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Yes. Now, you did mention earlier that yes, even with DACA status, that there are some limitations. Words to that effect. Can you talk about those limitations again? In my understanding of DACA, it gives you the opportunity to work. It gives you the opportunity. I don't know. Does it give you the opportunity to get a social? I don't know if that happens as well.
Yes. So you get a work permit, you get a social, and of course, with those two documents, you can get a driver's license.
You can get a driver's license.
Yes.
And what are some of the other benefits of the program? Well, obviously, you can't really travel, can you?
There's travel limitations. You can travel, but I never took the chance because you're at the discretion of the TSA agent. They could decide not to let you back in. So I never took that chance. You have to do renewal, I think, I would say like every 20 months. So you'll be paying the same fee that you paid initially. I think it's like around $400 and something every 20 months for renewal. I will never see Social Security benefits. Yes. And then the paying out of state tuition. That's something that, depending on the state, some of the new people coming in, they don't have access to that. So yeah, those are some of the limitations with DACA.
I see. But you wanted to add something. I didn't mean to cut your train of thought there. Is there anything else you wanted to add about the limitations?
No, I think that's all that I can think of at the top of my head. Oh, the healthcare thing.
Yes. So let's talk about that, because
That
that's
healthcare.
in my research. That is something that came up. So let's talk about some of the limitations there in respect of accessing healthcare that citizens have and things like that.
Yeah, at first I think it was this had to have been when I had first moved from New York. I was able to get health insurance through my employers. And yeah, I got it through my employer. And then once I didn't get that benefit from an employer, and I was going on my own, I had to pay like way more, way more, like hundreds of dollars in health insurance. And so I decided to go without health insurance for a few years, actually. And if I needed to, go to the doctor, I would pay out of pocket. It's cost me a lot of money. So yeah, that's another, drawback. You're not, yeah.
Right. So you have to renew. Yes, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You couldn't go ahead.
No, so you have to renew every 20 months. Then of course cost of health insurance is greater. You do not have access to Social Security. So while you're paying into when you get a paycheck, you're paying into the Social Security system, but you don't get those Social Security benefits back. Again, for some of you Caribbean people who are going around saying that, undocumented immigrants are mooching off the system. Well, how can they mooch off the system when they do not have access to one of the only really good social welfare systems that the United States have? So thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah. So with me leaving, yes. I've worked for 12 years, and I, unless they change something, I'm not going to receive Social Security once I retire. So, yeah.
Right. So let us talk about this court ruling. Of course, there was a Fifth Circuit court ruling. They tend to skew conservative and tend to skew MAGA, the red pill cult. But let us talk about was your decision to change course dependent on or based on that particular court decision that went down recently, where they're saying that the program is likely illegal?
You know what, Kellon? Well, the first time the current president was in office, I paid a lot of attention to what was going on. Then the Biden administration came in, I paid attention. Now he's back in office. I'm paying attention. A lot of the going back and forth with when it comes to the judges and stuff, the legality of the program. Once they're not, I guess, ending it completely, where it never became like an issue for me of looking at those things in particular. But when it comes to how the government is playing with immigration, this football, because as we see in different administrations came in and came out, I decided that I need to change course, as you said, because this is not a priority for them, either sides of the government. And so I have to take control of my life and what's best for me. And so I'm getting older. I'm not young anymore. So when I first, graduated from college, I was, young, the world ahead, the time is in my favor at that time. Now it's no longer, and I need to start, making roots, building community around me, where we can help each other. I need stability. And so those things, when, as I'm getting older, took priority for me. So I can't sit and wait and be like a sitting duck here, just looking out on the sidelines at the football that is taking place. And I understand, right now, that is not top of the the list of priorities for the government. It is what it is. And, you know, what can we do? You know, we have to really do some introspection and figure out what is best for ourselves. And for me, this is probably the better option for me to as you see, self-deport. Yeah. And
so in other words, you just don't want to sit in limbo. And again, if the program ends, then what happens to you? And in my research for this interview today, I also found out that there are many DACA recipients. I'm not too sure if you know any other DACA recipients, if you guys have a support system, but a lot of DACA recipients are also choosing that route. In fact, a lot of those DACA recipients are very educated. They have college degrees, they have university degrees in what the United States might call, quote unquote, high demand areas. I was reading a story about a young lady from Guatemala with a degree in engineering. And she chose to go back home, and now you know she says she's thriving as a result of that. So, what conversations have you been having with other DACA recipients?
I found out just like this interview. There's this young lady. She did the same self-deporting to Canada, but she has a Canadian citizenship through descent as well. And she was talking about her story, and she started a program. It's called Onward. There, people share their stories of different places that they self-deported to, whether it be Japan, Spain, Canada, all over the world, Germany, and they talk about the step-by-step experience in terms of what to do, what to expect. And everyone is just really open. A lot of people are returning to Mexico, and you know, that is good for the economy there because these are people who are well educated, and so they're doing really well. So people share their story, they share their fears, you know, you haven't been to these places in years, and or you haven't even kept up with what's going on, and so you know, it's a great place to be and to hear other people's stories and learn, you know. And so someday I will want to share my story there, but it's a great place. You can ask questions and see what's best for you, you know. So it's called Onward. And there's a website, and they have a Facebook page and a Discord page. So if anyone is interested, they can reach out to them. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Now, in your decision to, again, leave the United States, did you have conversations with family about this, your parents, your friends? Are there people who are saying, oh, well, you should not do that. Why would you want to do that? At least you have some form of legal status, you know, and again, the court thing with the legal football, you don't have to worry about that because, and I'm sure many people are saying this now. In fact, there was somebody who reached out when we published the flyer notifying them of what the program was going to be today, who said, oh, why is she leaving? You know, she should not be fearful of what is happening now. What do you say to those people?
You know, it's not about being fearful. I think it's more about what's in my best interest, you know. You see, like, United States is a great country. It's done a lot for me. I've made so many connections. I've made lifelong friends here. But I want to explore as well, you know, not Trinidad, but Grenada is not my last destination. I may go visit, may visit my home country, Trinidad. I may go to Singapore. I may want to visit Singapore. That's a place that's high on my list to visit. I want to visit Japan. Who knows? Maybe I may live in Japan for a few years. The world is just not United States anymore, and it's you know, we all have to be open to that. People are traveling. I want to see Saudi Arabia, Dubai, you know. and a lot of right now, especially with all that's going on, many high earners whom fear that it's just too many taxes that they pay in the United States, they are leaving the United States and going to more tax-friendly countries, where their income tax is not taxed heavily. So it's people are moving around the globe for different reasons, and I think just having this one track mind that especially since I'm not really into materialistic things as much. If you're very materialistic, I can see why you would still want to reside in the United States, but that's something that's not at the top of my mind right now. It's about building for me right now. So yeah, and so building requires saving and not spending. So that's where I am at right now. So yeah.
Absolutely, and it's good to hear you have that perspective as well. So let us talk about your plan. What's your return plan? Have you established contacts with folks in Grenada? What's that looking like in Trinidad? Have you made contacts with folks there? What does that plan look like? If you're willing to share.
Sure. I'm glad to share. I've made plans and I've reconnected with, of course, my dad is in Trinidad. I have a lot of family in Grenada that I'm very much connected with. That was a place we would go for, trips, break from school and stuff like that. So I'm planning to build a social media brand on Twitch, particularly, and it's called According to Naya. And so you can follow me there. I'm going to showcase Grenada, show what I get up to, because I'm planning to get into a lot of things. I want to share, my architectural side. I would like to work with people so they can build their dream home, especially people that wants to return to the Caribbean, return to Grenada. And there's a particular type of architecture that I really, really want to push in Grenada. It's basically like a hurricane-proof type of architecture. It's called earth-sheltered architecture. And with the United States withdrawing its funding from the Caribbean, we need to be more self-reliant in the Caribbean and building for the weather. And so that's something I want to push. I'll showcase all of that on my Twitch account, which is like it's a live streaming account. So go get the app, follow According to Naya. Also, I want to showcase my art. I plan to do quite a few paintings once I get there, a collection and so forth. And for the ladies, one thing that I got up to as I kind of like diversify myself, I got into the beauty industry. And so I got a certificate as an esthetician. And so I do lashes. So I will be doing that. It's a more natural type of lash extensions. And I will be doing that in Grenada. And I'll be posting all of that on According to Naya, the Facebook page, the Instagram page. I have a TikTok page. And so it's called Naya Lash Lounge. And so I'm bringing 5+ years of experience doing lashes to Grenada. So if you're coming to visit, you're coming to move, you can have those conveniences at your beck and call. Mm-hmm. And so I would love for, if you're interested in seeing my journey, you can follow me on Twitch and get me to 50 followers. I would love to do a giveaway of one of my art pieces and just show that you followed. And so that's what I am planning to get up to once I get there. Other opportunities may come. So my name is on the ground now and my family know I'm on my way. So I look forward to any kind of opportunities that come my way. And and continue to build a community there,
Are you prepared for because I would tell you this, and I'm sure you probably know what I'm coming with. But I remember when I left Grenada in 2004 to go study in Asia. It was in Taiwan, the Republic of China, and Taiwan at the time.
Oh, okay.
And because I speak fluent Mandarin, because I did my first.
Oh, I want to learn that language actually.
Yes, I would be willing to offer you lessons. I'm a fluent Mandarin speaker.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah. But I remember when I returned to Grenada 4 years later, I did have culture shock in reverse. In respect of, how slow things moved, some aspects of customer service. Yes. I did not develop an accent. You know, there are some Grenadians who would go to New York for 2 weeks and they come back with an accent. I did not. I still maintain my Grenadian accent up to today. And I don't understand some of all you go in America for 2 weeks and then all you come back talking as though all you... Grenada was never part of all your vernacular. But anyways, that's another story. Right? Yes. So how are you preparing for those elements of culture shock that you may experience when you go back to the Caribbean? Because you left when you were 14. It's a long time ago.
Yes, I left. It's a long time. My mom has been keeping me abreast as to what's going on there. She's currently visiting, and so I kind of have a sense of like what's going on there. In terms of the slowness, I always had in the back of my mind, I don't want to get too quote unquote Americanized. I always had that, and so I said, you know what, I want to get, losing power shouldn't be like oh my gosh, the world is about to end, you don't have the water coming on time, you lose water, or whatever the case may be. That shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart. So I've always tried to put in the back of mind that I don't want to be that person who's like, okay, whatever. But I have friends, and I have this one friend, she's really dear to my heart. She is actually certified in what is this thing called? Business etiquette and customer service. And I told her, hey, once I get there and, I see an opportunity for that type of skill, I will call you, I'll see where, because this is something that, businesses need, certain, whether it be office, whether it be hotel industry, they need to train, workers to understand how you greet people, how, not saying that they don't do that already, but times have changed. And, with people having phones a lot, there's certain types of etiquette that business leaders want their workers to have. Don't look at your phone while you're in service, put your phone away. There's a certain kind of way, certain things that have been updated that needs to be, to be updated. And so she is skilled in that. And I say, hey, keep an ear out. I may see what I can do. You could come in and have like a job or something like that. So, as I said, I've made great connections in the United States. I've met people that are amazing, and they have a lot of things to give for the universe still. So I hope to share that. I hope to share that when I come, and much more.
Yeah, you are, and I want us to be clear. There is a comment here saying that the title is misleading. You are Grenadian by descent, and that still makes you a Grenadian.
Yeah,
so
it does.
You have Grenadian roots.
I do.
We have a lot of Grenadians with blue eye and blonde hair. And Naya is as Grenadian as they are through their CBI passports. To that comment, but I do want to get I do want to get to some of our viewer comments, because a lot of the comments here are coming in fast and furious. Here, Karen Henry saying, listening to this young lady is inspirational. So you're offering some inspiration.
Yeah, that's what I hoped it would do
this morning. Yes, let's get to some other comments. Let me go up. Deborah is saying, Naya, you'll be just fine. You'll be enjoying life. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cadella is saying, business etiquette and customer excellence are much needed in the hotel industry. It's what gives a business a competitive edge.
Yes.
That's so important. Let's go. Let's go to another comment here. Again, I'm only looking at the positive comments. You know, someone is saying, again, in response to this person who's saying, oh, she's not a Grenadian, you know that most Trinidadians trace their DNA from Grenada.
Yeah.
They have this
Yeah.
privilege once they have Grenadian origin. And I think that is something in the law that needs to change in the context of Grenada as well. Let's go on. Ambika is saying, this is an opportunity for growth. Get out and explore your full potential.
Thank you.
Jackie is saying, do you have architectural experience with container homes?
Yeah, that was something that I was pretty interested in. I do know a few companies in the US that, specialize in that. The only drawback I have with that is the weather in the Caribbean, in terms of hurricane winds. That's the only drawback. But in terms of structural integrity, but it's something that's possible. It's something that's possible once done correctly, if you're open to it.
All right. The Grenada government needs to set up an access point at the airport where they can document returning nationals and their qualifications. That's actually a very good, Ms. George. That's a very, very good observation. I hope there is at least a directory of professional diasporans who can contribute to, of course, Afro-Grenadian ambassador is saying, visit Africa. You need to also visit the motherland. That's the true motherland.
That's on the list of places to go. There's so much to see.
Yep. And he's saying again, welcome home, my sister. Welcome home,
thank you.
My sister. Sharon is saying, you are still gifted and black. In the words of the late great Nina Simone, we are young, gifted, and black. Yes. And Akeem is saying, no place is better than home. God is the provider and master of all things. You will be fine. I wish you nothing but the best.
Yes, thank you.
Again, another comment. You already made up your mind. I'm happy for you. Wishing you the best. Someone else is saying, let's see. That I don't think. And Anthony's saying they put so much fear in people. Even some with green cards are afraid to travel for carnival. No joke. This is true. A lot of people are certainly. This is a period of fear.
Yeah.
This is a period of fear.
Even if you have you have your green card in, and maybe you're waiting for it to renew or something like that. I think they put a pause on all of that as well.
Yeah.
So
But even for those who are citizens as well, right? Citizens are getting caught up in this dragnet. They recently arrested, I believe, a Hispanic person. Again, my well of empathy is very slim for that particular demographic because we know how the election went. But this man was profiled and arrested and held in an ICE detention center for almost a week until they were able to verify that actually, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen. And I have a curiosity. I wonder if ICE visits Russian and Ukrainian communities in Brooklyn. But then I digress. Sorry, I'm doing too much today. I'm doing too much today. So Naya, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
For appearing on the Bob Report. Are there, for other DACA recipients who might be in your position, obviously everyone makes a decision based on their own personal circumstances. Yes.
Yes.
But for others who might be experiencing that fear and that anxiety now, what words of encouragement would you want to give to those people who might be trying to decide about where they want to go, given everything that's happening now?
Yeah, I think you should do some self-examination, take some time to evaluate and learn about yourself. Get a book and just write down all the things you want for yourself. Then the next step, I think, is to reconnect with your people back home. Don't be afraid if you haven't spoken to them in years. Don't be afraid. Go reach out, talk with them, and you might be very much surprised how they may be really interested in knowing how they can help. Because at the end of the day, we all need community. You need community. That's how we live and thrive. And you might have knowledge that, that you can share with them that could benefit them, and they even have knowledge that, could benefit you. So just sharing and see, and just be, give yourself grace that you haven't gotten to where you wanted to get to in life, because we're always evolving and mastering self. So I feel like I've gotten my master in me. I haven't fully gotten to doctorate yet, but we're getting there. So once I get there, I'll let you all know. But yeah, that's definitely, take the steps to reconnect. Take the steps to reconnect, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Absolutely.
And all the naysayers, just kind of, don't ignore them fully. Use it as a way to make like a plan B and C with what they have to say. Don't completely ignore, because they may have some valid points. So yeah, that's what I would tell them. Yeah.
Elsa is saying, very interesting and informative. Naya looks so much like her mommy. I suspect Miss Elsa Batiste knows your mom there. So very well. So again, Naya, thank you so much. We will be following your journey, and I suspect following this interview, some folks may reach out. So I would let you know if they do via our WhatsApp or via our email service here on the Bub Report. So thank you again for appearing on the program this week.
Yes, it was nice meeting you, and thank you for having me, Kelon. Yeah.
Yes, and you did say you watched the program, so thank you for watching as well.
I'll be sharing you often. Hopefully I get to come back on another time. So
yes, absolutely, and we'll make sure that happens. Sure that happens. Viewers and listeners, this has been a very interesting, heartwarming segment, really, with a young lady of Grenadian descent here, Naya, who will be returning to Grenada, of course, very soon. And again, a decision on her part to return and to self-deport, really, given everything that's happening in the United States. Now, of course, she's a DACA recipient, but she's saying that she does not want to continue to live under the legal shadow of the DACA program. And so she's choosing to instead carve a new destiny for herself in that process. So we certainly thank her for agreeing to speak with us. Of course, for legal reasons, she did not want to say what her actual legal name was, of course. And so Naya here is a sort of a pseudonym. But certainly we thank her for appearing on the program this morning and for sharing her story. And we also want to thank you, viewers and listeners, for your comments for this segment. Now, for the second segment of the program, we will be joined by the leader of the opposition in Grenada. That's the Honorable Emmeline Pear. The Honorable Emmeline Pear joined us for a conversation earlier. I just want to make the point that this will not be a live interview because, of course, we did this interview earlier simply because Mrs. Pear, as you know, is very strict about her church time. And so we conducted this conversation before, but we will certainly play that conversation with you. And of course, it's no less interesting if we're not able to take your comments. But certainly, that was an interesting conversation that we had with the leader of the opposition in Grenada. I have to say that, of course, this is the very first time, or the second time actually, that the leader of the New National Party, the current leader that is, appeared on the Bub Report. Her predecessor never appeared on the Bub Report, so credit to her for at least braving circumstances to come on the program to speak to those major issues that are affecting the national community. So we're going to play that conversation. But before we do, we want to take a quick break and come back for the second segment of the program. Folks, this is the Bub Report. We thank you for staying with us. Stand by.
Very, very well indeed.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
2, 1. Viewers and listeners, welcome back to the second segment of the Bub Report for this week's edition. Now, last week, or rather 2 weeks ago, Grenada's Finance Minister, the Honorable Dennis Cornwall, presented a $1.9 billion EC dollar budget for fiscal year 2025. Now, the 2025 was a deviation from its traditionally scheduled presentation period of late December to early January, owing to what some observers say were the fiscal challenges resulting from the ravages of Hurricane Beryl, although others may beg to differ. This budget debate was also historic in that it was the first time since 1990 that a female leader of the opposition presented the primary rebuttal to the estimates of revenue and expenditure. Now, one of the critical points of debate in the 2025 estimates is the question of how the budget will be funded and whether or not the budget deficit of 2025 will affect government's overall fiscal performance this year, and what this may portend for overall growth prospects in 2025 and beyond. Now, here to make sense of the 2025 budget as part of a post-budget debate conversation is the Honorable Emmeline Pear, the leader of the opposition and the Member of Parliament for St. Andrew Southeast. We're happy now to be joined by the leader of His Majesty's opposition, the Honorable Emmeline Pear. Mrs. Pear, this is your second appearance on the Bub Report, and it's becoming a habit which I like, I have to say.
You have to be very fortunate.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the budget, I just want to get this out of the way. I do know that Dr. Mitchell, at the People's Parliament event in his constituency, obviously Dr. Mitchell did not have an opportunity in Parliament to rebut to the debate. Instead, he went to his constituency to have that rebuttal. There was a bit of a scare that everyone saw live on camera. How is Dr. Mitchell doing? And we do know that the party released a statement, but I suspect we just want to follow up and just to talk to you about this, because we saw how I don't know if panicked is the word, but you really rushed to Dr. Mitchell's aid. You were the first one to rush to his aid in that moment. What was that moment like?
Well, just first to say that Dr. Mitchell has been doing well from the very night and continues to do well. As you may be aware, Dr. Mitchell has been suffering with a cold for a couple of days now, almost into a week. And if anything that might be affecting him right now would be the cold that he's been battling with. But as it relates to the incident that happened on that night, quite obviously, if you were following probably a few minutes into when the episode happened, Dr. Mitchell obviously became emotionally overwhelmed. And I can identify with this because in almost every conversation I had with Dr. Mitchell in the last week leading up to that activity, he went on about his concern about Mr. Campbell and what Mr. Campbell meant to him, etc., etc. So I know this is a situation that has affected him significantly. And he was at the point speaking about him witnessing the passing of someone who was so critical in your life and your success over the years. So the beautiful thing about this is that within 10 minutes or so, he recovered. He decided to stay on for the remainder of the session, the wrap-up of the session, and he was able to walk out of the building, went home. On my way home, we passed there, followed up, and he was his usual self and continues to be his usual self, back to the domino table the following.
I see that playing dominoes. He really loved dominoes. Dr. Michelle, if you're listening, I would love a domino game with you, sir.
I think it's just one of those things that, you know, every now and then, every one of us may be affected by something or have some situation. And I was happy that I had the opportunity to, as you said, what did you say? Come to his aid at the point. We all find ourselves in a situation where somebody can help at some point.
Absolutely. Now let us get into, of course, before we get into brass tacks with respect to the actual estimates of revenue and expenditure, as a matter of public education, of course, before the budget is presented to Parliament, before it's debated, there is a finance committee meeting that is held in advance of what we see publicly in respect of the budget debate. Talk to us about the finance committee meeting that was held before the estimates of revenue and expenditure was laid before Parliament.
So the finance committee meeting prior to the presentation of the budget was, I would say, like any other finance committee meeting where the government vote by vote goes through the draft document. And in that session, it provides an opportunity for any member, whether it's on the government side or the opposition side, to clarify, to point out any errors, or to probably seek clarity, as I said, to ask a question. And so we went through that process as we normally do. At the end, there was one item I recall that was to be added in terms of figures to the document. There was a request for some notes, explanatory notes, because of some changes that were made before. And I thought it was a good finance committee meeting. The only thing that bothered us then was when the final document came back. It came back with changes that we did not agree upon in some cases. But we looked at the bigger picture, identifying that this budget is already late and there are many people who are affected by the late presentation of the budget. So, for example, people in Karakou who were told that, you know, certain programs had to be placed on hold until the reading of the budget. We felt it was not necessary to delay further since there was not anything of great consequence in terms of the changes that were made.
Absolutely. And of course, the finance committee meeting is normally held before going into the budget. You did mention the timing in which this year's budget was presented. Is that a concern that you also raised at the finance committee meeting?
I don't recall. I'll need to get the records. I don't recall if we had raised it there, but definitely I did raise it at the response, in the response to the budget. The excuse given quite lame in nature, and we find absolutely no justifiable reason why this budget was so late and why so many people had to be affected by such a late budget.
Absolutely. Now, Minister, let us get into the leader of the opposition. Let us get into brass tacks here. Now, the government indicated that this budget, while it does say that it does have a primary deficit, they were also saying that there is a surplus, and they sort of rebutted your claim that this budget is, again, deficient in respect of that deficit. So we're going to play this clip here, and we'll have a conversation about that as we get into the brass tacks about the conversation on the budget.
Money. The citizens of Grenada, you want a rich government and poor people, or you want rich people and a... So if there's a deficit, who are we giving the money? The citizens of Grenada, you want a rich government and poor people, or you want rich people and a poor government? So, Mr. Speaker, when you talk about deficit, it's a simple thing, you know. If the government is collecting less from its taxpayers and spending more on them, it is for the benefit of the people. It's that simple. So we have to appreciate, Mr. Speaker, when I talk about putting people first, and when I say this is the people's economy, everybody's talking about project, project, project. Concrete, concrete, concrete. Steel, steel, steel. We are investing in our people. And when they have the money, it is the same economy they come back and spend it. It is the same goods and services they're buying. It is the same VAT they're paying. It is the same income tax, the same property tax, and the government getting back the revenue, and the economy grows. So, Mr.
Because there are many deficits, Mr. Speaker. There are many deficits. You have current account deficit. You have primary deficit. You have overall deficit. And there are more. So when you mention deficit, you must be clear and indicate which deficit you're referring to. This government, Mr. Speaker, did not present a budgeted deficit to this House. It presented a current account surplus budget. And it is here, Mr. Speaker. It is here. You go to the document on page 12. Read it. It says, Mr. Speaker, the overall budget summary is as follows. I don't want to point out this one. Current account surplus. Current account surplus of 86.5 million. Mr. Speaker, let me say this. It is quite acceptable to present to this House a deficit budget, but not a current account deficit budget. And if you look back, this House has been presenting overall deficit, Mr. Speaker. Overall deficit budget for the past 20 years. Look back and you will see it. You think, Mr. Speaker, you think I, as an economist, worked in the Ministry of Finance for years, worked at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank for years, as a country economist for Grenada and Montserrat. You think I will ask, or I will allow this government to present to this House a current account budget deficit?
And Madam Leader of the Opposition, you heard both the Leader of the Opposition, the Prime Minister, as well as your colleague, Member of Parliament for St. Andrews Southwest, your neighbor constituency there, saying that part of this budget is not only a deficit, but that there is a current account surplus to finance the budget. What say you?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me start by saying, if you listened to my presentation, the introductory part, the part where I started to speak about the economy, in the introduction to that, you would see and you would hear that I did mention the current account surplus. I mentioned that. I called out the figure, the 86.5. I just made a note of it again as he spoke. So I did reference the current account surplus, but that by itself doesn't give you a clinical view of the government finances and how it's performing. And hence the reason you can't stop and clap just at the point of the current account surplus. So the current account surplus speaks to the recurrent revenue, and it speaks to the recurrent expenditure. It doesn't tell you anything about loans. It doesn't tell you anything about capital expenditure. It doesn't tell you anything about those things. And so while this is okay, this is good, that you have a current account surplus, it only speaks to a certain aspect of the government's management of the economy and the financial situation of the country. So let us look at this, for example. Now, a deficit of $337 million, that cannot be taken in isolation. Number one, this figure, the overall deficit, does not include debt, does not include that as an expenditure. It doesn't speak about what we're going to pay as principal, what we're going to pay as interest as it relates to the debt. And you hear this talk about suspension of payment. Well, that is only a percentage, because in this budget, the government has said to us that over $400 million will be paid in 2025 in that area, in debt. And so the question is, what is the full picture? What is the full picture? Because even when you speak about the $337 million, you still have to take into consideration the 400 plus millions of dollars that we would have to also pay in debt. So we cannot, in isolation, and I'm quite sure if this was a deficit, he would make no reference to it. But we can't look at it in isolation. We have to look at the broadest possible picture. But there's another context to the picture. There's another context. And I'll make reference. I made a note of the comment that the Prime Minister made. Collecting less, spending more on them. Question is, who is them he was referring to? I assume the them there was supposed to be the people, based on, well, what he said just before that. But let us be real. Let us be real. Are we really spending more on the people? Almost every productive sector would have underspent in 2024. Almost every productive sector had a reduction in budget for 2025. So are we really serious about spending more on people? If you look at the social sectors, for example, $8 million cut in a program as critical as Imani, call it whatever you want, but something where young people have an opportunity. $8 million cut. You look at a cut in agriculture. What are we saying there, right? A cut and underspending in critical programs for young people. The Empower program is another example. But guess what? You take a look, scan this document, and look at the areas where we have overspent, and look at the areas where we underspent. The Prime Minister's ministry, for example, overspending by over $2 million on travel, hosting, and entertainment. So I beg to disagree with the Prime Minister in that statement when he said, and I'm actually reading from the note, we're collecting less and spending more on people. The question is that really the true picture? Is that really the true picture? I doubt not.
Now, the administration's counter argument will be, especially on some of the programs like the Imani program that you mentioned. In fact, I believe it was Senator Seville Francis, who I believe she's in the Ministry of Youth, articulated that increases were given to those under the Imani program, that, you know, that they're investing much more in respect of the compensation that these trainees receive. So one might argue that, well, while there might not be as much intake in respect of the numbers, but that the compensation that the people in those programs receive are greater. Your thoughts on that? Absolutely, absolutely not making sense in the context of what we're speaking about. If more people are benefiting, tell me how that's practical when you cut in the budget. Tell me how is that practical? Tell me how this makes sense in the context of the previous statement the Prime Minister made. When you budget $1 million, for example, for farm roads, but only spend $300,000. These are the kind of issues that when you put the statements together, they're not adding up. So the posture, the behavior, the reckless spending, you look at the report, celebration of 50th anniversary of independence. Look at the report, look at the spending, and tell me if you feel convinced in the statement that we are collecting less and we are spending more on them. Tell me if you feel convinced about that. Now, let us go on to talk about, of course, the backdrop of this budget, shall we say the elephant in the room or the barrel in the room, really, is Hurricane Beryl. Yes, and of course, the government's argument here, some of those who are sympathetic to the government's position, is that the budget was presented late owing to the ravages of Hurricane Beryl. In fact, the administration went to Parliament I believe in September of last year, to pass a huge supplementary estimate. So I have to go through the estimates to see how much of that was actually spent there, because I think that is important. Maybe that's the work that the Finance Committee does as well. But talk to us about your party's position in respect of Hurricane Beryl recovery and what was allocated in this budget. And if in fact you were in government now, what would be your budgetary positioning for recovering from the ravages of Hurricane Beryl? Of course, the administration touts its Build Back Better program in respect of the housing project. It also touts other visual transformation initiatives around Hurricane Beryl recovery. What would you do if you were in the administration shoes now in respect of what was budgeted in the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2025 around Hurricane Beryl?
So just before I respond to that, let me go back a bit with regards to the previous question and the issue of the overall deficit. And when I said earlier, the issue of context, it is not just the overall deficit. It is the context that goes with it, the reckless spending. Where are we heading? And I did not mention then, apart from the payments that we would have to make this year as it relates to loans, but also the loan that this government has just received authorization to take to fund A, the budget, and B, the building of a new hospital. Now, what is concerning, because you see, when you speak about them and doing more for them, one has to really examine what does that mean in numbers, in figures. What is that exactly? Because even with that loan, you're not talking capital projects. And one might say, okay, we're talking the hospital. Well, of course, yes, but are we actually going to start the construction in 2025? Which means that most of what is going to be spent there is not going to be spent on the actual construction of that facility. It's going to be going mainly to consultancies, right? And so we are very concerned that in that loan appropriation bill that was brought to the House, the $825 million that we are going to take a loan to burden future generations. Of course, 51.5% of the total expenditure. And we are extremely concerned about the signs that we are seeing that we are heading down a slippery slope. Now to respond to Hurricane Beryl. So the excuse that was given that because of Hurricane Beryl, we had to delay this. I view this as more a sign of incompetence on the part of the government. 16% of GDP compared to Hurricane Ivan, 200% of GDP, as I explained before. I don't think this administration has a proper justification for this. But let us look at what happened. You referenced the what government came with very colorful figures in terms of what was going to be done as a response to Hurricane Beryl. And if you look at what has happened, there must be concern. And if we just pick out probably the most critical area of housing, the government told us in 2024 that they were going to be building about 100 houses and handing over 100 houses to families December 2024. Do you know that that program delivered not one house to a family in Karakou? While people are waiting, still waiting, people on the tents, people on the steps, the government was not able to respond to meet the basic housing needs of most of the people there, or some of the people there. At least, even if it was to meet 50% of your commitment, that could have been given a pass, but not one. So you had a lot of glamorous, gloating promises, and the government failed to deliver in that regard. Now, we've heard, for example, even underspending in that particular area. So you indicate that we have a major problem and we are putting monies into addressing this problem. Look at some of the areas. You just look through the document and see the underspending. So while people in dire need of supporting Carriacou and Peter Martinique, the government is underspending on those critical areas, those critical needs, while overspending in non-priority areas like travel. And that is what is, for us, the sticking point in this situation. So the question is, what could have been done differently? So what didn't they do? That is an issue that needs to be addressed. There's concern over labor. And so the excuse is we could not do better. And for some reason, you must have known you could not do better, even when you presented this. Did you do an analysis? Did you do an assessment before you made that promise? Before you projected what you're going to deliver? You can't be speaking out in the wind. You got to sit down, assess the situation, know how many houses were damaged, know how many houses you can actually deliver, know what resources you would need. This is what planning does. And so if the government made a commitment as it relates to the building of these houses, were unable to deliver not even one in the time, and that indicates that shortage of labor is an issue. Then my obvious question would be, what did you do about the shortage of labor between then and now? So I'm saying this to say that if you analyze, assess the situation properly, you can now put a response in place that would, for example, highlight that there's an issue with labor and point you to where will we source labor. Now, you listen the government speak to this for 2025, and they are still complaining about a labor shortage. You hear nothing about, okay, we are going to partner with country A or country B. We are going to provide free accommodation, free passage to X amount of persons from Y place to come in for 1 month, 5 months, 6 months to address the labor shortage. So when there's a problem, you don't wait to complain about the problem. You identify the problem and you identify solutions to the problem so you can report, therefore, there was a problem with labor. We did have a labor shortage, but here is what we did. And as a result of that, we were not able to do 100 houses as we attempted to do, but we did 80. That is the language you expect to hear from a transformational government. That's the language. Unfortunately, what you hear is total opposite.
Well, let us speak to that. But you did say that the government did not deliver one house, except I believe it was about 6 days ago, Minister Tevin Andrews, the Member of Parliament for Carriacou and Petit Martinique, handed over 4 houses. Now, I'm not too sure if that's 4 out of 100 or if that is 4 out of 4 that was already delivered prior. Again, I confess I
can help you because I'm keeping track. It's 4 plus the 3 previously, sometime earlier, about a month ago, yeah.
And that is only in Carriacou and Petit Martinique there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. We don't, I believe there was one delivered in St. Patrick.
It's unacceptable. It is unacceptable almost a year after the hurricane. And it's unacceptable for many reasons, inclusive of the fact that 14 days after the passage of the hurricane, this administration benefited from $118 million, the CRIF payout. And so, we have to be careful about pampering this administration because we'll continue to have underperformance. So unless somebody is prepared, a supporter is prepared to say, hey, you are not performing at the level that you are supposed to be performing. If we continue to tap them on their back for delivering 5 houses almost a year after the hurricane, then we'll continue to have this situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, and sticking on the whole issue of burial hair. Now, one of the things that I always look at when I look at in preparation for any conversations on the budget has to do with the question of the debt to GDP ratio, and has to do with the fiscal rules and responsibility. Of course, is now the Fiscal Resilience Act or something like that. But from the media report, this is what was said. It was said, analyzing the provisions, an expansionary fiscal stance is needed to support the resilient recovery post-Hurricane Beryl. And this is what the report says. It says this will require a temporary weakening of the fiscal position with a primary balance deficit, again, we're going back to that deficit here, of 208.6 million, or 5.1% of GDP forecasted. The report goes on to say, the section of this report goes on to say, the fiscal stance represents a deviation from the primary balance rule of a surplus of 1.5% of GDP under the Fiscal Resilience Act of 2023. And the reason why I'm bringing this question up has to do with, one, the whole issue of the debt to GDP ratio, and two, our commitments under debt repayment obligations in the context of the suspension of those fiscal rules. So this question has two parts. One, should the administration, if you were advising the administration, should we continue to suspend those fiscal rules in 2025? At least some of the provisions are suspended. And two, let us speak to the overall debt to GDP ratio against the backdrop of funding Hurricane Beryl. I think I was muted there all along.
No, not all along, just to the end, not all along.
Yes, right. So let's speak to the whole question of suspending those fiscal rules. Should those fiscal rules be suspended, continue to be suspended? Do you agree with the administration that those fiscal rules should be suspended given the backdrop of what's happening with Hurricane Beryl? And are you also concerned about the debt to GDP ratio against this backdrop as well?
So the issue of suspension and delaying the payment, because, you know, one of the things I don't think we get, you know, you listen to some people and you almost think that what the government is doing is getting a debt forgiveness. It's not debt forgiveness. So you kick it down the road, it has to be paid, right? And so it really does not line up. It doesn't match what the government is saying. Your fiscal situation is so great. You have so much savings and everything is so good. Then why do you need to suspend? Why are you not able to pay now, right? And is the situation so grave that it warrants this? Because at the end of the day, you have to pay. And so if you're in a position to pay now, why not pay now, right? And so these are some of the concerns that we have. The government saying one thing, in action, in the document, it's another thing, right? And so the issue of the debt, now we have to also look at this from a couple of different perspectives. Now, it is not only what is right now, it is where we are heading, but it is also the pattern, the behavioral pattern that you're observing of this administration. Now, with all the concerns raised about travel, for example, and I'm speaking non-priority areas, do you know that if you check, you would find that in many instances, the budget for travel would have doubled in 2025. Now, you're looking at patterns, you're looking at behavior, and so you're able to have a good guess as to where we are going based on our behavior pattern, right? But also, if you're talking about increasing debt and you are talking about reducing productivity, you're talking about less investment in the productive sectors, that's a dangerous place to be going. So when you look at agriculture, for example, there's been a significant drop in productivity in agriculture. Now, while that is the case, you are cutting your budget in areas in agriculture, critical areas. You are looking at underspending in critical areas in agriculture. And so I'm saying the pattern of behavior, the figures that we are looking at, so you can't just look at the deficit $337 million and say, oh, well, it's just another deficit. You also have to look in the context that this government has an intention to borrow over $8 million in the current year. And when you look at this 800 million, sorry, I wish it was 800 million, right? Now, over 800 million, 825 million, you look at what is going to happen. Recurrent expenditure is where the focus is going to be. But when you look at, for example, the increase, and there was reference to the increase in expenditure, right? And we speak in this year. Look at what happened on the capital side. Look at what happened on the capital side. That is where the action is. That is where you know what's going to happen in terms of job creation, productivity, the productive sectors. That is where you're going to be looking, not recurrent. And that is why when you speak about the current account surplus, yes, that is one thing. But let us look at the full picture. So if you look at the budget increase expenditure in 2025, just about $77 million, sorry, about 27% allocated for capital project. So if we look at a simple way of viewing this, if debt increase and productivity goes down, then where does that lead us? Are we heading in the right direction? And as I said, what we are seeing on paper and what we are seeing in behavior, when you put those two together, it is not a bright picture as it is painted to be.
Well,
you look at what is likely to happen if government proceeds with this loan. It is likely that we are going to be heading to about $3 billion in debt.
And which automatically increases the debt to GDP ratio, which I believe right now.
Significant increase.
And it's close to 70%.
From our calculation, it's going to be about 43% increase from what this administration met when they came into office. And that is why we are saying, and I'm stressing this point, the pattern of behavior of this administration, bloating the public service, spending and overspending on recurrent expenditure, it is concerning. The reduction in focus on capital expenditure is also concerning. The overspending in non-critical, non-priority areas, it is also very concerning.
Well, Minister Pear, except that the IMF may disagree with you there in respect of the recent report on Grenada's fiscal performance for 2024. And this is what the IMF said. It said, through end June 2024, Grenada's economy, of course, that was before Beryl, was experiencing sustained strong growth, supported by buoyant tourism, moderating inflation, and a narrowing current account deficit, a surge in CBI revenue. Of course, that is something to look at because there might be a drop in that, supported by a strong improvement in the fiscal position and reduction in public debt. It goes on to say this in respect of 2025, that Grenada's near-term economic growth is projected to remain resilient at 3.5% in 2025, buoyed by limited hurricane damages to tourism infrastructure and the authorities' large recovery and reconstruction spending. So let us talk about the IMF report. The IMF report paints a totally different picture to what you just articulated.
And if we follow the Prime Minister's lead, we won't even be discussing the IMF report because we're not supposed to take that seriously. Right?
Well, he did say that. He did say that. Well, I think one has to be consistent.
You know, and these are some of these are some.
But Madam Leader of the opposition, I don't think you'll be following his lead here. So let us talk about the report.
We definitely won't. We definitely won't. But let us ask ourselves a question: when was the IMF review? Right? What has happened since the IMF review? And even if the IMF said we're in a perfect situation, let's just imagine. You see, the IMF's language should be one that cautions us. If you read it carefully, it should be one that cautions us. So we are not in a luxury situation. And let us look at our vulnerability and know that we should not be taking this report and rocking back in our chair and feel that, okay, it's a perfect situation. Let us just have a merry good time. Let us look at our vulnerability. Climate change, for example. God forbid, we have another hurricane in 2025. Where would we be? What would be the situation, right? So we have to look in context. That report must be taken into the context of what has happened since then and what can happen after this report. And should we be boasting and be satisfied, or do we need to take the right actions to ensure that we do not deteriorate in terms of our fiscal position? So you have the vulnerabilities as it relates to climate change and all that's happening there. But let us also look at the international global context, the realities. And you see the posture of the President of the United States of America. You know, you wake up any morning and the situation there could absolutely affect our situation here.
It's extremely volatile, to say the least.
Extremely. And you just have to think of the tariff that is going to be posed on some of the ships that are going to be docking in the United States harbor and carrying items that has to get to Grenada. What is likely to be the end result of this as it relates to cost? If you consider global context, you consider environmental context, then you're starting to feel very uncomfortable about that report and where we are right now, months after. But there's another critical one. You yourself reacted when you mentioned CBI. You yourself reacted. And I'm sure it is because you agree that part of the reason for the performance of the government in the last probably 2 years or so has a lot to do with CBI revenues. And you also know that that's a very vulnerable situation as well. Because one, the government will not, as a matter of fact, from their projections, they are not going to make the same kind of revenues that they made from CBI over the last 2 years, because you know it had a lot to do with the number of Russians we were selling passports to, right? So they are going to perform much less in that area in terms of collection. But also, we don't know for sure what is going to eventually happen with a program like this. Now, if this is our backbone, if this is our spine, then you need to ask yourself, will we be able to walk without it? Will we be able to walk without it? So the heavy emphasis and the focus on CBI revenue, this government must never be comfortable. And that is why, that is exactly the reason why we have to be more responsible in our spending. Because as all people would tell you, you need to ensure that you put aside for rainy days. You need to ensure that you are spending in a responsible way so that you don't get to that point where you are in a crisis. And that is what, again, I'm saying, we are looking at the pattern of behavior. We are looking at the way this government is managing our finances, our resources, and it is very concerning to us.
Are there any bright spots in the 2025 estimates of revenue and expenditure? Of course, one of the capital projects that was mentioned, again, in respect of implementation, again, implementation rate is always at the back of my head here. But in respect of the major capital project that the government speaks to has to do with the construction of the new hospital. Of course, I believe it's under the Project Polaris. Of course, your colleague from St. Andrew as well, the Honorable Delma Thomas, indicated that there's going to be some work done. Again, we're speaking here to capital projects on the construction of the Carlton Home, I believe, which will be in the Maribor area in St. Andrew. So those two major capital projects are going to come on stream. Of course, there is the continued work done in respect of the rehabilitation of Fort George, and of course the relocation of the police headquarters and the ongoing road projects. So can you see those as projects that will generate sort of economic activity in the country?
Mm-hmm. So let me reference implementation rate that you just referenced as well. Now, it's difficult to be optimistic about this budget is very difficult. Reason being, you recall 2022 when a new ministry was set up for the purpose of increasing implementation rates. That's the main reason for the setting up of that ministry, the justification that was given. As a matter of fact, the minister took the pain to go through almost every project of the New National Party's administration and to highlight in exact terms the implementation rate. Project by project by project, he related to the implementation rate. Now, didn't you find it very strange that during this budget presentation, whether it was the presenter, whether it was the Minister for Implementation himself, that there was no reference to implementation rates? And if there was, it probably won, because I don't recall any, right? So implementation, as a matter of fact, we might be doing far worse now than we were doing then. And not that we were in a good place then. I'm not going to say we were. But I'm saying we created an entire ministry for that purpose. But if you look at what has happened with most of our major projects, it gives little or no hope for these projects that you just mentioned. Because most of the major projects of government, they're all delayed. Tell me how many were completed in 2024. They're all delayed, and maybe if they were just delayed, maybe we can give that a pass. Most are cost overrun, major cost overrun on those major projects. So I'm saying this to say that looking at the 2024 budget, I don't have much hope, quite honestly. The posturing of this administration, the competence of this administration, the delivery of this administration, I would not get excited about these. If they happen, I'm going to be the first to say I am happy they happen. But based on experience, it is difficult. But let us look. You asked me if there's a bright spot. And I want to go with the government's brightest spot. The government has presented as their brightest spot in this budget the construction of a new hospital. To start with, the government announced that there's going to be a groundbreaking ceremony in 2026. So based on what they said there, it is even likely that the actual construction might not even happen in 2026. Let's hope it does, right? So in this year, there isn't going to be any construction of any hospital, any new hospital. What you're going to be doing this year is spending quite a lot of monies. And if you look at the loan appropriation bill that was brought, it's requesting about $400 million towards the hospital. I don't know what percentage of that the government intends to spend in 2025 on the hospital, but the loan request said about either $400 or $425 million towards this particular project. In other words, recurrent. It is not going to be towards anything infrastructural in 2025. And so I'm saying, if you're to get excited about this, not in 2025.
Not in 2025. That's sort of a more long-term.
Other point that is even more significant than what I just said. Even more significant is the point that we have to ask ourselves a very critical question. What is most important now for the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique? Isn't it medication, availability of medication? Isn't it availability of services, health services? Isn't it improvement of current health facilities? There's a lot of talk about a new hospital, but people, not even we are not even the one leading the conversation. People are saying they prefer to have proper health care right now than to wait for 2029, maybe 2028, maybe 29, 2030, I don't know, for the completion of the construction of a general hospital. How many people would die between now and then not being able to access proper health care? And to us, that is where we think the focus should be, not cutting in that area, increasing. And if you look at what is the figures presented for this year on the health, over $30 million. But look at it carefully. Look at it carefully. More than 80% of that amount is towards projects that people are not going to be able to directly benefit from in 2025. The real issues remain unaddressed. The real health issues remain unaddressed.
Very well. What about the Carlton House sod turning? Of course, that will be a project in rural St. Andrew. I'm sure that is. Any thoughts on that one? Of course, that the minister, that's the Honorable Delma Thomas, rebuffed criticism that that this project will not be getting on stream, and she indicated that a sod turning ceremony will in fact be happening this year.
Okay. And you see, that's what I am fearful about. When you say a sod turning ceremony is going to happen this year, I get a little bit uncomfortable. Tell me that construction will start this year.
Following the sod turning ceremony. Well,
right.
That is a question that I
a
will be.
lot of sod turning ceremony when nothing happened for quite a while. Let's just let's just consider that things are signed, the soil is dug, and the actual construction comes months after. So I'm saying if we see the start of construction of that project, we would be extremely happy. It's a project that we ourselves had in our budget, right? The only thing, as I said, with the establishment of an entire ministry to fast track projects, I would have thought that a project like that would have started in 2023. But if it comes in 2025, and we are able to access the service at the end of 2025, I would be the first one to say, I think this is great.
Now, Madam Leader of the Opposition, one of the things that you articulated before, but that was on my mind as well. And recently, now Standard & Poor's, whenever Standard & Poor's speak, I listen. That's one of the international organizations I listen to. And in a report, Standard & Poor's says this about the global economy in 2025. It said, amid trade turmoil, the global economy is facing a rising risk of a hard landing. Yeah, the firm's latest focus sees real GDP growth of just 2.5 this year, which would be the weakest result since the global financial crisis, excluding the pandemic-driven shock. Yeah, so they are certainly predicting a much bleaker economic outlook globally. That, of course,
that is
globally, that impacts. So yeah. So the question here is, again, if you were advising the administration, what can we do to really insulate ourselves from this impending global shock that Standard & Poor's is predicting?
And that is why the government should not be wasting time arguing about current account surplus versus overall deficit. What the government should be doing is taking a posture that says exactly what you just said. We are going to protect ourselves. We are going to create a cushion for people so that whatever fallout, whatever that is supposed to affect them would not affect them in the way that it should be. And so if you look, for example, at the government's projection and the packages that were presented that had to do with cost of living, it's a perfect example that this government has made no accommodation for possible threats, possible risk that we can face in 2025. As a matter of fact, we don't even have to go to what is projected and what is possible later on in the year. We could look at right now, the CPI, Consumer Price Index, is showing us very clearly an increase in food prices, for example, right? An increase in medication. You're seeing an increase in agricultural products. So if you look at poultry, if you look at pork, if you look at fish, for example, it's speaking one language, increase in cost. So you look at the response of the government, and it really does not match. Not one medical item was on that list for VAT exemption, not one. Considering that the cost of medication has been going up, And considering that this is giving us a hint that this is likely to further affect people in 2025. You look at the list of items, VAT exempted items, and it must concern you that this government don't seem to understand that there's a serious issue as it relates to food, right? But when you look at the other measures, it is also concerning that this government seems not to understand that there is a crisis, there is a situation that warrants a particular response. You cannot respond in the same way to a worsening situation. So if you look at what was presented last year as it relates to cost of living and the buffering, the cushioning of the effect for those who need that support, you don't see anything that is significantly going to make a major difference. And so it is the reason why I believe there was such a hush during the presentation of this 2025 budget, because there wasn't much for people to be excited about. How many new jobs would be created? How are we going to stimulate the economy? So you speak about the global situation, then obviously our response must be to look at our current situation. What are we going to do? What are we going to do in the business sector so that more people can have more revenue coming in, so that they can employ more people, so that more people would be put to work? The construction sector, the tourism sector, the agricultural sector. How do we boost agriculture, especially the rural economy? What do we do as incentives for farmers? How do we address the issue? You can't have $1 million and spend $300,000 on farm roads, not in a time like this. Not in a time like this when agriculture production is down. But on top of that, you have little new measures as it relates to cost of living. And cost of living happens to be, you ask any Grenadian, what is the issue or the concern that is greatest to you? What is affecting you most? You just ask. We've done the surveys. Ask them. The number one consistent issue is the rising cost of living. Now, you would think that a responsible government would respond to that. So it means that this budget should have been a reflection of the reality on the ground. Pull out the measures as it relates to the rising cost of living, and people are not inspired. They are not hopeful because of that. They are not. And so you have to look at a multitude of things outside, as I said, with regards to the issue of cost of living and providing that cushion, providing that support so people are able to thrive in spite of the global threat, in spite of the existing local situation. But you have to manage spending, right? Because if I have $5 and I'm going to fet out $4, where does that leave me? And so we cannot leave out an important factor in that the government must manage more effectively its spending, because we are going to now end up in a situation where more and more loans are going to be required to cover our expenses. And we cannot afford to be in that situation, although this is where we are right now. And even when the government speaks about savings and treasury bills, well, you have to pay back treasury bills. It's actually a loan. So we have to ensure that the threats that are internal and the threats that are external, we are preparing ourselves, we are posturing, we are positioning ourselves that we are able to respond appropriately. And the signs that we are seeing, I am not convinced that this government is very conscious of the realities around us. You go through St. George's, go to any town, Grenville, go to Guave. The activities there, the lack of activities, the inactivity there tells you something about the situation, businesses as well as other persons. And so we have to continue consistently to examine our situation, and government is supposed to respond accordingly. So you can't be overspending in non-critical area when businesses are struggling, businesses are closing. People are not able to buy basic necessities. And so these are some of the things that I believe we have to look at. What are the areas that we intend to generate revenue from in the next year, 2 years, 3 years? Are we just going to sit back and wait for CBI to narrow down, to zero down? What are we planning to do? Because it appears that this is where all of our energies are going at this time. And so we have to ensure that the productive sector, and this is an administration, I believe, that has spoken most about the productive sector. Yet still, when you look at the budget, there's no reflection of any concern, any interest in, you mentioned a term before, expansionary fiscal measures, or even investment in the productive sectors. It's very concerning. And you see, if a person does not examine the details of the document, it's going to be very difficult. Someone asked me one of our senators asked me for the budget speech, to resend the budget speech.
Well, it's not the speech, it's the estimates, really. That's
the point. If you're reading the speech, you're going to be seriously misled. You got to go down in the document to understand what is happening.
Yeah, it is the estimates. And again, Public Education 101, viewers and listeners, there are two elements of the budget. You have the speech that's, again, prepared for delivery, but it's the actual estimates of revenue and expenditure where, again, and there are specific votes for each ministry and each item and things like that. That's what you have to look at, really. As a matter of public education, we try to do that here on the Bub Report as well. But Minister Perry, there are three final issues that we want to touch on, and that has to do with the sort of the premature conclusion to the budget debate as was witnessed in Parliament. But one of the things that we raised in the last episode of the Bub Report, where former Senate President Chester Humphrey and former Senator Dr. Tessa Sincere appeared on the Bub Report to speak to what occurred there. And of course, again, the Speaker's continued conduct in respect of how the Parliament is refereed continues to be an issue. But one of the things that the Speaker did mention, however, was that both the Prime Minister, the Honourable Deacon Mitchell, and the Member of Parliament for St. George Northwest, Dr. the Right Honourable Keith Mitchell, was not present. Now, the first part of this question is, whose speaking turn was it at that point when Minister Cornwall stood up to speak? Was it the Prime Minister or was it Dr. Mitchell? And the second part of this question is, why were you not present as members of the opposition in Parliament at the time of the resumption of that parliamentary session? Because it appears as if you only came in after, I believe, that the Prime Minister stood up to speak, of course, and at that point he asserted his privilege, essentially upending the Finance Minister, which I had a curiosity about that. But can you speak to those two issues, please?
So I'll begin that by saying I have a problem when people outside of the chamber manages what's happening in the chamber. And I leave that statement hanging there. If you're in the chamber and you indicate that you're prepared to speak, then the Speaker calls you. The Speaker's concern should not be about who's not in the chamber. It is about who is there and who is eligible to speak. So let us start from there. I don't think it is the Speaker's business to be running around trying to find speakers. Or not speaker is probably not the best word here, but presenters.
Finding the members of Parliament, the MPs, yes.
Right?
Yes.
I don't think that is his primary business. His primary business is to manage what's happening in the chamber. And you made the point, the only person in the chamber at the time who did not speak or was eligible to speak would have been the Honorable Dennis Cornwall. And of course, he proceeded to speak. And the only thing he could have done was to wrap up the debate, right? Now, to get more specific to your question, whose turn was it to speak according to the schedule? According to the schedule, it would have been only one person, the Prime Minister, and he was not there. As I said, whether it's Dr. Mitchell, whether it's myself, whoever, it is not the Speaker's business to be running around like a father to look for his children to speak. I have a problem with that, a fundamental problem, because the next time I'm not there, I don't know that the Speaker is going to come looking for me to speak, right? Now, the schedule as given by the government side, wholesale, the opposition team agreed with the schedule wholesale. The Speaker of the House and the Clerk of Parliament were also aware of the schedule, and they too were guided by that schedule, which was prepared by the government side. After lunch, there were 4 speakers scheduled after lunch. There were 2 persons from the government and 2 persons from the opposition. Let us narrow that down to 3 members, considering that Dr. Clarice Modeste, member for St. Mark's, would have already spoken. So there are only 3 speakers left. According to the schedule, the next speaker was supposed to be a government representative. That's according to the schedule that the government provided. The next speaker was supposed to be someone from the government. And that could have only been 2 persons remaining. But mind you, of the 2 persons remaining, member for St. Patrick's East and member for St. David, only one of those 2 persons could have stood up after Dr. Modeste. And here is why. Member for St. Patrick's East, it would have been impossible for him to speak again except he was wrapping up the debate. So obviously, according to the government schedule, it would have been the Prime Minister. So it means that the Prime Minister should have been there at that time to provide his response to the budget. Now, it appears that the Prime Minister took a decision that he was not going to present there. And this obviously must have been a decision taken during the recess. I don't know, right? When we went to the back and answering the question as well, why weren't we there when the debate started? And the answer to that is very simple. When we went to the back, because the speaker announced the recess was going to be for 3 minutes, our intention was to sit right there and wait out the 3 minutes. But when it went beyond 5 minutes and is going beyond 5 minutes, we started to become curious. What's happening? You would notice we did not leave together with the speaker. When we went to the back, while we were in there trying to, because no one said anything to us. No one said anything to us. While we were there, the speaker came. He knocked on the door. And the speaker announced that he thinks there's an issue. The Prime Minister has indicated that he will be wrapping up the debate. I was the first person to respond. And I asked him, so what is happening right now? Just before the recess, wasn't there a member wrapping up the debate? Are we going to have 2 wrap-ups? How is that possible? And his response to that question was, so Dr. Mitchell, you didn't need an opportunity to speak? Which I don't understand, because as I said, that's not a speaker's role to go finding people to speak.
Well, I suspect the speaker might be asking only because of the schedule, because I said, well, the Prime Minister didn't speak yet, but again, if the Prime Minister was, I do not understand why the Prime Minister was scheduled before Dr. Mitchell.
Well, you would have to ask his team that. You would have to ask his team that. This is what they presented. But very interesting, Dr. Mitchell's response to him coincided with what I asked. Dr. Mitchell said, well, there's no way that I can speak again because the member for St. Patrick's East
already stands up.
Wrapping. So
and by implication, he's wrapping up the debate.
By implication, I cannot speak. And the speaker's response was, also, you prepared to forfeit the opportunity to speak? He said, yes, based on the rules. If the member has started to wrap up the debate, then there is no way that I can speak anymore. So the speaker walked out. The speaker left at that point because we had stated our case. And he said, okay. Those were his closing words, okay. Now, we were of the impression when the speaker left that the member for St. Patrick's East was going to be continuing the wrap-up of the debate. So we were just addressing one matter before returning. We had absolutely no idea, one, that the speaker had started, because we didn't get an indication that he went back inside. That's one. And two, we had no clue what was said as it relates to the presentation that started and the presentation that ended. So we got back inside, and I remember very clearly, Dr. Mitchell asked me, he said, Emmeline, what is happening? I said, well, it appears maybe the speaker gave the member for St. David's an opportunity to speak based on the schedule. So I assume you will get an opportunity to speak after. And he asked me, are you sure? No, I suspect that during that conversation, someone would have sent Dr. Mitchell a message indicating what was said prior, which we did not hear. So during that time, I wrote a note and sent to the speaker asking, can you confirm to us in what capacity the member for St. David's is speaking? Is he making his contribution as a member for St. David's, or is he wrapping up the debate as the Prime Minister? And the speaker returned the response. By that time, Dr. Mitchell was already on his feet. The speaker returned the response saying that he was wrapping up the debate. I had two very deep concerns about that. One, this does not line up with the impression I got from what the speaker said when he came to meet with us. And secondly, I found that it was wrong that a member had started to wrap up the debate and we had to go to find somebody to replace that member. I could not, and twice. That's the other thing that is so confusing. The member started to wrap up. He spoke for, I'm sure, about 5 minutes. He was called to the speaker's chair. He returned and the speaker allowed him to continue. Now, this has to be ridiculous. This has to be ridiculous.
And then, so again, you know, your former colleague, finance minister, said this about your colleague, Dr. Mitchell. And of course, former Senate President Chester Humphrey also critiqued Dr. Mitchell's conduct when he stood up. And of course, again, when we're speaking of conduct, we also we have to acknowledge that I heard the speaker stroops. And I'm like, did he really stroops? I heard that, unless I'm going deaf, I don't know. But this is what your former colleague, Anthony Boson, said. Mr. Anthony Boson, he said, what People's Parliament is Dr. Mitchell referring to? What lesson are we teaching our young people? Dr. Mitchell had 2 days in which to make his budget presentation in the Parliament building, where his constituents elected him to represent them. On his volition, he chose not to and disrespectfully walked out of the People's Parliament. Obviously, I would not expect that you would speak for Dr. Mitchell, but you, of course, the leader of the opposition. Any response to what your former colleague, Mr. Boson, said, and of course, what former Senate President Chester Humphrey said about Dr. Mitchell's conduct as well? Again, two things can be true at once. One can critique the speaker's performance while also having an examination or critiquing the performance of the members in this case.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into critiquing anybody's behavior in that regard. Today I was at the Parliament. I whispered a word to Senator Cox, right? I was sitting right behind him. I whispered a word, and then I was told that a member of the National Democratic Congress posted something asking the president if she's aware that I'm engaging with members as guests. Now, if you look on the opposite side, 5 minutes ago, the exact same thing was happening, right? So I think we got to have a balanced playing field when we address these issues, and we have to address them with fairness. Now, I am not going to give an explanation or comment on whether the speakers should have sucked his teeth or whether Dr. Mitchell should have sat down. Of course, the rules say if the speaker is addressed, you respect it. But I take into consideration the context of everything. And truth is, this could have been avoided in several ways. It could have been avoided in several ways. Way one, maybe I could, as one person say, maybe I could have asked for a recess, and I totally agree. Another recess, maybe I totally agree. But this could have been avoided if the member of government who communicates as it relates to the schedule would have communicated that there is an intention to change the schedule. So I would imagine that when the member for St. George Northwest stood, I mean, this to him obviously must have been unfair. And it must have been unfair in the context of what I said before. Because when he had the conversation with the speaker, the understanding at that time and the concern raised at that time was, were we going to have two persons wrapping up the debate? And when he left, we were of the understanding, and Dr. Mitchell made the point that he would speak on the bills that were coming up after and the adjournment. And he was quite comfortable with that. Now he's arriving back in the chamber, and we know Doc can sometimes get a bit agitated at the situation. Maybe where I might stay very calm, he might be very expressive. And this is just two different human beings. Now, the way you respond to something, I may not respond to that. Everyone responds differently in a situation. Now, how would I respond if I consider something to be absolutely unfair, if I determine that this situation is not democratic, and if I determine that somebody must have set this situation up deliberately, right? So his response, I am not going to say he responded the best way or he responded in the right way, but we have to look at the context of what happened at that point. And sometimes not only the context of what happened at that point, sometimes persons attempting to mislead persons, because right after this incident, members of the government were on public platforms indicating that the opposition did not follow the schedule. I had to speak to the member of government and say to him, you know, this is very unfair to me, because if I have evidence that you sent me a schedule that clearly stated that it was not the opposition's turn to speak, you cannot have your members saying otherwise publicly, because I would have to defend myself. And the only reason I reference the schedule publicly, it's for that reason. That's the only reason, because it would have been unfair to the opposition that the government would have gone on and on about us not following a schedule when it's exactly the opposite.
Very well. Very well. Thank you again. Getting all perspectives and getting some background information, I think, is so critical. Because a story has three sides, as we know. That's so important.
Sometimes.
Yes. But finally, and we'll get to closing comments, and that is a contemporary issue here with respect to threats of visa sanctions against government officials in the Caribbean. I'm sure you probably heard of this. Of course, as you know, Grenada's strong relationship with Cuba, that is currently being tested by the administration in Washington. Do you associate, or does the opposition associate itself with the sentiments expressed by most governments in the Caribbean, really, that to stand in solidarity with the Cuban medical mission that continues to do so much for healthcare systems, not only in the region, but quite frankly, around the world?
So I would say as an opposition, and when we were in government as well as a NNP administration, we've always stood in solidarity with Cuba, the government and people of Cuba. We've always shared a very great relationship, and we've benefited significantly from the government and people of Cuba. We don't subscribe to the view that this is an abuse of the human resource of Cuba when people come on medical missions or people come to take up jobs here in Grenada. We don't consider it in the way that it has been explained publicly by the US government. We feel very strongly. In some cases, people come and they volunteer, they support, and in some cases, people are actually employed. And we've had absolutely no problem with that arrangement in the past, and we do not consider it in that way. As it relates to the threat that this presents, of course, it's a serious threat to small island states, especially where we depend on support in many different situations. COVID, for example, I'm not sure how we would have survived this had it not been for some of the support that we got from the government and people of Cuba, the nurses and doctors and persons who came and sacrificed and gave service. If you go to the General Hospital now, I'm sure you're going to find Cuban doctors who are there. And even outside of the General Hospital in private practice, right? So the service, the support that we have received from the government and people of Cuba, we cannot underestimate and understate the value of that. And we would forever be appreciative of what they have done and what they've contributed, and not just in the medical area, in so many other areas of development in Grenada's history. But let me make this point of concern. There are many individual statements being made by various heads of state or ministers of foreign affairs, ministers of government. And I believe very strongly that there needs to be a united statement. What is the regional position on this? You see, if we continue to fight individually, it's going to be harder to win. We may not even win. But if we come together united on a position and we can properly negotiate with those concerned, we can properly defend our case and lay our position down, I believe it would make a bigger difference than individuals standing up and making threats as it relates to what they're prepared to lose. I think we have more to gain if we come together and we engage. Maybe President Trump doesn't understand how important medical services from Cuba is to many, many people in this region. So I'm saying, rather than going on a program and saying that you personally are prepared to lose your visa.
And your wife's visa.
And your wife's visa. That's probably okay. It shows, a personal emotion that you have and you feel strongly about this and you're prepared to lose. But let us take into consideration the person who lives here, for example, has certain documents, right, that can take them to the US to access services that they cannot access here because they may have families in the US, right? Let us also take into consideration the persons here who have very close relatives and friends in the United States, and from time to time, they may want to visit them. So they may not hold the position of the Minister for Finance that he doesn't need to go to the US, right? I'm not sure what we are going to gain if every head of state in the Caribbean or every minister for foreign affairs say that they're prepared to lose their visa. I'm not sure that this is going to solve the situation. I expect more, and I believe it is critical and important for head of states in the region to come together, lobby, come together, pay a visit, sit with the President of the United States. You may end up like certain persons who ended up with nothing, but at least you would have stated your joint, united position on this matter.
As CARICOM, absolutely. Unity is strength, and united we fall. United we stand, divided we fall. It's so relevant to this period. Honorable Leader of the Opposition, over to you now for some closing comments.
Well, just to close by saying that normally when you have a budget read, and I'm sure from your experience you can identify with that, there's a certain buzz that comes with that because people are listening how many new jobs would be created, which sectors of the economy are going to be boosted. And there's a hopefulness, there's a buzz that goes with it. There was a deafening silence after the reading of this budget. And I don't think it had anything to do with the presenter. I think it had to do with the lack of opportunities within that budget presented. I think it had to do with the poor performance of the administration in the previous cycle. And I think it has to do with the fact that when you look at what is contained within there, it frightens you as to what to expect for 2025. So the performance of the government, in reality, does not match the beautiful budget speech that was presented. The projections for 2025 do not match. They don't coincide with what was presented in that budget speech. And we are appealing to this administration. One, we are appealing to the administration to seriously refocus the Ministry of Implementation or merge it with some other ministry and reduce the cost of that ministry. Because you cannot have a Ministry of Implementation when your performance, your implementation rate across ministries is so low. Something has to be done as it relates to implementation. You said we did not do a good job there, and we probably accept we could have done far better in terms of implementation. But you have a special ministry just for that. So we expect to see 10 times, 20 times better than what we did. So we are appealing to this administration to focus itself this year on implementation, increasing implementation rate. We're also appealing to this administration to reduce wastage, cut spending on non-critical areas. So I don't expect to see overspending of $2 million in an area like travel and hosting and entertainment. Cut down on those areas. I'm also appealing, maybe in the supplementary budget, we must come with a proper package as it relates to cost of living. And how do we cushion the effects of the rising cost of living? We must. But also another program or package that looks at stimulating the economy, particularly the rural economy. And when the government is able to do that, then you can start to say, okay, it's okay to take another loan. Because if your loan is primarily spent on the productive sector, on capital projects, then we would not be as concerned as we are, where most of that is now going to go towards recurrent expenditure. And as I said, the general posturing of this administration and the general attitude of this administration as it relates to the voice of the people, we would want to see significant change in that area. This administration has an attitude as it relates to consultation that is not encouraging. Whether it's the union, whether it's the people, there are too many occasions where the administration that taunted the fact that the people's voices must be heard, the people's voices were either shut off or ignored. And so I believe that is a critical area. People must be at the forefront. They must be at the center of the rollout of this year's budget. And that would require, in many instances, consultation. And I hope this government is going to do much better in that regard as well. So in essence, my best wishes to this administration, with all of the loopholes, with all of the shortcomings, with all of the deficiencies of this budget. If we can do 80% of what is there, I would still rate the government as successful at the end of this year.
At least you're striking again an optimistic tone at the end there. So they can't say that you didn't do that. So Honorable Pair, thank you so much for appearing on the Bub Report this week. Viewers and listeners, this is the Bub Report. We were just joined for wide-ranging, a very extensive conversation with Grenada's second female leader of the opposition. Of course, incidentally, the first leader of the opposition, Winifred Strawn, also came from St. Andrews Southeast constituency as well. So we have a repeat of history there in many respects. So we thank the Honorable Leader of the Opposition for appearing on the Bub Report this week. And viewers and listeners, equally, we thank you for tuning in. We thank you for your comments, and we will see you next week for yet another installment of the Bub Report. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.